Well, good evening, everyone. It's great to see all of you here. My name is Jeff Todd, and I'm the Executive Director of Alumni UBC and the Associate Vice President of Alumni for the university. And I would like to start by acknowledging that we are gathered on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. So it's indeed my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's Your Next Step, the Art of Influence. We're now in our 7th season of this career development program, and we're grateful for the support from our partners and sponsors. We're also thrilled to be partnering once again with the Forum for Women Entrepreneurs, founded by UBC alumna Christina Anthony. And to bring you greetings from FWE, I hope you'll welcome Monica Murray, a longtime FWE board member, to say just a few words of welcome. Monica?
Thank you, Jeff. My name is Monica Murray, and I am a board member with the FWE. The FWE has been around since 2002, and we're an organization that supports, educates, and mentors over 1,500 women across the country. Some of our panelists today are certainly inspirational influencers, and we're excited to be here and to be invited here tonight. In fact, one of our panelists, Lisa, was an E-Series grad, which is I would call it our signature event, and it's essentially a boot camp for women entrepreneurs. Our next E-Series event is in April, so if you know of any female entrepreneurs that would be interested in participating, please have a look at the website or come and speak with me. In terms of being an influencer and a leader, I looked it up, and influencer actually means in and flow. And so it's about inspiration, influence, encouragement. And I do have to tell you a story because tonight I came home to get ready, and I walked in the door, and my cat had been outside, and there was muddy footprints all over. So I decided to try my art of influence and influence him to, rinse his feet in the bathroom sink. So it didn't end well. Kind of like the bunny from Monty Python. My left arm will probably fall off at some point. So I'm going to stick to influencing people and not cats. And also, very excited to hear what our wonderful panel has to say. And thank you again for inviting us to participate in the Forum for Women Entrepreneurs. Thank you. Enjoy. Thank you, Jeff.
Well, thank you, Monica. I'd also like to recognize Nick Hayes, who's in attendance tonight on behalf of our presenting sponsor, Cathay Pacific, and we're going to hear from Nick a little later as well. And finally, we want to thank our broadcast and online media sponsor, CBC, and our event series sponsor, Manulife Alumni Insurance Plans, for their ongoing support of our programs. So ladies and gentlemen, I hope you'll join me in thanking all of these sponsors who help us really bring these kinds of valuable programs to all of you. So we're really happy that all of you carved out time out of your busy schedules to join us tonight here at the Robert H. Lee Alumni Center. And I'd just like to ask for a show of hands, how many of you are attending your very first Your Next Step program? How many of you? Majority, that's great. Well, welcome. We're delighted that you're here. Usually we would encourage you to turn off your cell phones, but we don't want you to do that. We'd actually love you to tweet the event at Alumni UBC. Hashtag is UBC Next Step, all one word. And now I'd just like to tell you a little bit about some of the things happening here at the university, because this has been an extraordinary time for UBC. It's ranked among the top 35 universities in the world. And it's just wrapped up the most ambitious fundraising and alumni engagement campaign in Canadian university history, raising $1.6 billion and engaging more than 130,000 individual alumni over the course of the campaign. As a key legacy of the campaign, thank you, I agree, that's worthy of. And as a key legacy of the campaign, on September 30th, we actually officially opened the doors to this spectacular building, the Robert H. Lee Alumni Center, which is a home for alumni for life. And it's right at the heart of the Vancouver campus, and you saw a short video showcasing it just before we walked onto the stage. It's named after one of UBC's most dedicated alumni, Bob Lee, and your new Alumni Center is actually the first of its kind in Canada, and it's a living symbol of the partnership between UBC and its global alumni community. So we're excited to welcome you here tonight, and we look forward to welcoming our more than 307,000 alumni to their home on campus. Not all at once, obviously, but we really invite you to return again to a future Your Next Step, a UBC dialogue, or any number of activities that might satisfy your intellectual, cultural, and social appetites and engage with other alumni, students, faculty, and emeriti. So coinciding with the official opening of the Alumni Center on September 30th, we also launched UBC Centennial. UBC is proud to mark its 100th anniversary as a global leader in education. 100 years since welcoming its first class of 379 students in September of 1915. So to learn just a little more, I hope you'll direct your attention to the screen for just a few minutes.
There are few earthly things more beautiful and splendid than a university.
There are few universities that can claim to have grown to the stature of UBC in such a short span of time.
It is the unique privilege of the University of British Columbia to be located where one of the world's most important traditions began and flowered.
At this significant milestone, we should acknowledge and praise those who founded the university.
You accepted traditions and became part of traditions.
Every last citizen is in fact a part owner. And this is without doubt what the founders had in mind when they chose for the university motto, Quum Est, it is yours.
It is a place where those who hate ignorance may strive to know, where those who perceive truth may strive to make others see.
That we may indeed be the People's University, that is the spirit on which this university was founded, and it still lives and survives on this great campus today.
Well, the Centennial is a year-long program of initiatives marking 100 years of learning, research, innovation, and community engagement. And over the past century, UBC is proud that we've graduated over 300,000 students who are really making positive change in British Columbia, across Canada, and throughout the world. So there's a host of activities planned throughout this year, and I would invite you to visit our Centennial website, ubc100.ca, for more details. So tonight, we're actually going to be using an audience engagement platform to include all of you in the conversation. And so I'm going to invite you to take out a mobile device, your smartphone, tablet, laptop, whatever you have, and just please take 30 seconds right now and go to alumniubc.cnf.io. And the URL should be on the screen behind me right now. I'm going to give you just a minute to find your phones and find this URL. So this is going to actually allow you to ask questions and comment in real time throughout the discussion, and other attendees can actually like your question. When we get to the Q&A portion this evening, we're going to endeavor to pose the top questions from the audience to the panel. So hopefully you found it, and we'll be sharing the URL on the slide deck throughout the discussion. But for a trial run, we've pre-populated a question for all of you, and it's simply, are you a UBC graduate? So if you just take a minute and answer that question. and then we'll start to see the results on the screen here in a minute. Okay. And you can also see them on your own screen, but we're going to project them, I think, here. There we are. So we have about 73%, 74%. See how it keeps changing? So we'll say roughly 75-25. So to all of you graduates in the audience, we're delighted you're here. And those of you who didn't have the good fortune of obtaining a UBC degree, we're delighted you're here. So welcome. We always welcome everyone here. So this is an event as part of a larger career program that we call Your Next Step. All of our alumni have actually told us that you want more information, guidance, and programming about careers. So we created Your Next Step in response to you. This is, we have a new online and in-person career programming series that focuses on providing assistance to new graduates, young alumni, and mid-career alumni. So to maximize the impact, some of the program takes the form of in-person events such as this one, but we also have event podcasts, webinars, and profiles of alumni that are all available on the Alumni UBC website. So this evening, we're going to hear from experts who are influential leaders in their field. And this conversation is actually going to be podcast on the Alumni UBC website, and the conversation will also be videotaped, and it's all going to be available on the Irving K. Barber Digital Library. So I really want to thank our panel this evening for carving out the time from their very busy lives to join us. And I hope you'll join me in thanking them for being here tonight. So thank you so much. And now it's my pleasure to welcome Nick Hayes from Cathay Pacific to the stage to introduce tonight's moderator. Nick, thank you for being here, and thank you to Cathay.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Good evening, everyone. For the record, I'm one of the 25% that didn't have the good fortune of studying at UBC, but it's a great pleasure to be here this evening representing Cathay Pacific in support of UBC alumni and the Your Next Step series. We're absolutely delighted to be a new corporate partner to UBC. I think it's a great opportunity for us as a business to support their community here in British Columbia, but also to bring together these two brands, these two world-class brands, if I may say. In case you don't know, as part of our corporate partnership with UBC, all of you here today that are UBC alumni have access to some very special promotional fairs exclusive to you. So I hope after this event you'll take a moment, jump on the website, and have a look at what's available to you. That's the end of my sales pitch. But I'm here to do more than just encourage you to use your alumni benefits and to fly with Cathay Pacific, although that would be good too. I'm really here. I want to congratulate you all on being part of such a strong and flourishing alumni network, that you've taken the time this evening to come here and connect and engage, and all this whilst learning to excel in your given fields. And tonight's topic, as you know, is the art of influence. I think a key skill in any field. I remember when I was, a while back, still at college in the UK, I learned a little bit about the art of influence, but I did it in a rather unusual way, perhaps. I did it as spending my summer vacations working as a door-to-door salesman of encyclopedias. Now that was a great way of learning about influence, but and I'll tell you about it if anyone's interested over a drink. But I wish that I'd had an opportunity like we all have tonight to learn from the panel that we have here this evening. So please do enjoy the discussion, and I look forward to meeting many of you after the panel and at future events in the Your Next Step series. Thank you. And I'd like to introduce tonight's moderator, Andrew Chang, who joined CBC News Vancouver as host in the summer of 2014, shortly after returning from Sochi as part of CBC's broadcast team there. He's also spent time in the host chair for other network shows such as CBC Radio 1's The Current, CBC News The National, and CBC News Now. Prior to coming to Vancouver, he spent a successful decade with CBC Montreal, where he covered a number of memorable moments in Montreal's history, such as Montreal's 2011 federal election night special, which resulted in the collapse of the Bloc Québécois, the 2012 election night assassination attempt of Pauline Marois, to name just a few. His incredible career as a successful and well-known national journalist has brought him to our Vancouver screens at 6 o'clock every weeknight. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Nick, for that very kind introduction. I'm going to try to get into this chair without falling down. Please bear with me. Although if I did fall down, it would probably take the pressure off everyone else who's about to do that for you live here on the stage. What a pleasure to be here to moderate tonight's discussion with a handful of very, very influential people about what it means to be influential. I think the interesting thing about influence is that it seems to come very naturally to some people. For some people, it just seems like this talent that they have to make themselves heard. Yet for others, it is something that they have to work at. It is a skill that they have to spend years to perfect. But what I think is critical, and something that I think you will take away from this evening, is that unless your career path involves you locking yourself alone in a room and never coming out, eventually, it would be wise to learn how to use this tool, how to wield this tool that is influence. Because down the line, it may very well make the difference between you achieving your goals or, conversely, failing to mobilize the people and the resources that you need to have on side. So at this point, I'd like to invite our 4 distinguished panelists. Please make your way to the stage. And I will say that we were originally going to have 5 panelists. Unfortunately, Bing Tom could not make it tonight, but I assure you that the 4 of our very distinguished panelists are more than capable of carrying their weight. These are folks who, through their mastery of the art of influence, have managed to accomplish some very, very impressive things. So first of all, let's just give them a hand, and then I'll introduce them one by one. And I'll just qualify this right now by saying that I'm going to try to introduce them. My introductions will be woefully inadequate to describe the depth and the scope of your careers, but I'm going to do it anyways because better I speak for a short time and give you guys time to talk rather than the other way around. So let me start closest to me, Shane Ramsay, the CEO of BC Housing since May of 2000. 2 years prior, he was responsible for setting up the Homeowner Protection Office, which would later become a branch of BC Housing, and Shane served as its CEO as well. Shane was recently listed in Vancouver Magazine's 50 Most Powerful People in Vancouver, and I want to read what the magazine said about you when you made that list. It said, "When you're CEO of the provincial agency responsible for creating social housing in one of the world's most expensive real estate markets, you are in the thick of one of the thorniest public policy issues in the province." And I think that's very true. Shane Ramsay, folks. Lisa von Sturmer. In 2010, Lisa founded Growing City, and under her direction, the company has grown more than 100% in the past year, as she makes it her mission to bring composting and recycling right across the country. She is an award-winning entrepreneur, co-founding 2 companies in the past 3 years. She won the 2012 Canadian Youth Business Foundation's National Best Green Business Award, as well as Small Business BC's Best Business Concept Award in 2010. And I'm only half done your introduction here. You may also recognize Lisa from what is one of my favorite shows on television. You made a very successful pitch on Dragon's Den, and in fact was voted I think it was the second most impressive pitch on the show, so which is very impressive in and of itself, given the folks that you're up against. And you've since written a workbook called Pitching to Win. That's it, right?
That's right.
So I will also note, as Jeff mentioned earlier, that Lisa is a member of the Forum for Women Entrepreneurs, tonight's partner, and was part of their prestigious E-Series program in 2012. So give Lisa a warm round of applause. Moving down the line, Janet Austin is the CEO of the Vancouver Ywca, and so that makes you responsible for one of the largest, most diversified nonprofit organizations in the entire province. They offer a broad network of services for women and families for 60,000 people each and every year, and this is in more than 30 different locations right across Metro Vancouver, so this is a vast network. Janet herself has been recognized in a number of ways, including receiving the Business in Vancouver Influential Women in Business Award and the Vancouver Board of Trade Community Leadership Award, among a number of others. She was also named to the WXN list of Canada's 100 most powerful women in 2008, as well as the Vancouver Power 50 in 2014. Janet Austin. And last but certainly not least, Bob Rennie, the founder of Rennie Marketing Systems. Their recognized leadership for envisioning new and innovative strategies in development, risk management, and marketing real estate has led to landmark projects such as restructuring the Olympic Village and Woodwards. Bob is also the recipient of the Queen's Diamond and Golden Jubilee Awards, the Order of BC. He has a doctorate from Emily Carr University, and along with Shane, was also listed most recently in Vancouver's Power 50. Bob Rennie. And so we've made it a point to set Shane and Bob as far apart as possible, because I don't remember who was actually ranked higher in the Power 50.
Bob was way up there.
Okay, but we'll try to keep it clean tonight. So for all of you folks listening right now, just the way this is going to work, we have 30 minutes where I'm going to bombard you with questions all about influence. After that 30-minute period, as you heard before, we're going to open the floor up for all of you folks and through the site for another 30 minutes where you can ask your questions. After that, there will be a reception where you can meet the panelists one-on-one, and so if you have any unanswered questions, you can ask them then, or you can just stay and mingle as well, as you please. And as you also heard earlier tonight, this is being recorded for an audio podcast, and the video will be posted on the Alumni UBC website. So with all of that out of the way, welcome to the four of you. Thanks for being here. I want to start with what I think is a pretty straightforward question, though maybe I'm wrong, and that is, what does it mean for you to be influential? And maybe I'll start just down at the end with Bob.
We agreed to this earlier. You think of all these smart things to say and write down, but we're sitting here in the Robert Lee Alumni Center. When I saw Bob's name up, and I spoke to Bob Lee this afternoon and didn't know where I was coming at UBC, and I've always referred to Bob Lee as, when I grow up, I want to be Bob Lee. So how do you get from being Bob Lee, coming from a family that sold bamboo curtains, to having your name on the Alumni Center? And you look down the row here, and I'm talking to Janet in the green room, which is potato chips, and saying, Janet, how is the building going on East Hastings? Extremely innovative to have rental on top of a library. Lisa, I even forgot, Lisa came in to see me and sit in the coffee shop next door when she was doing a startup. I'll meet with anybody who's new in business. I don't want to meet with old guys that are thinking of retiring in an easy way out. But unless it's arts and culture or mental health, it's not something I can pursue. Lisa's giving back. Janet's giving back. And Shane, I'm in Chicago, and I was at a board meeting there, and Shane's staying down the block. And what were you chairing? International Housing Partnership, and you're talking to Andrew coming in here, and I said, seriously, how many nights a week are you doing this? And it's evenings and weekends, and it's 2 nights a week, and all the prep that goes into it. And anybody with influence is giving back. there's no way people are going to take your call if you're only taking. I have these smart sayings of whoever dies, I'm old, with the largest Rolodex, which would be the most number of contacts on your iPhone wins. I have maybe 8,000 contacts on there. And influence is, will people take your call? But I think starting out, we had a conversation earlier, I decided that I wanted to be a brand from when I was 19 years old. I decided I wanted to be in the same career for 25 years. I've done it for 40 years, and I used to tell my kids, I want to be able to walk through the local shopping center in Burnaby, Brentwood, and hold my head up and never have to duck that I've been in a bad business deal with anybody. But I find that youth, we surround ourselves with ourselves. And we have to make sure that we surround ourselves with diversity. You're all a brand how you came in here, whether you offered somebody a seat or didn't, whether you sat next to your best friend as usual or didn't. And sometimes we think when we're showing somebody around or helping somebody that we're showing off, that we're making them look better. What you're really doing is you're making yourself look better. And people don't want to get to you, they want to know who you can connect them with. So by knowing as many people as possible, who could you do a favor for, and it'll all come back later, if that helps.
So giving back, clearly one of the important things for you in your book. Janet, what about you?
I mean, I absolutely agree with that. I would like to, I guess, make a point of differentiating formal authority from influence. So as a CEO, I can hire and fire people, and I can assign them certain tasks, but I can't tell them what to think, and I can't shape what they think, and that's something that requires influence. And so how you get that influence, I think, really comes from three things. It comes from building relationships, so trust. And what is trust, really? You trust people in three ways. You trust them to be competent, you trust them to behave ethically, and you trust them to communicate honestly. It comes from respect, and that respect is always mutual. And it comes from credibility. And I think there's a couple of things that really define what credibility is. One is your expertise or your competence, but the other thing is your reliability. So people know that you will actually follow through on the things that you say you're going to do. So I think those are ways, if you practice those characteristics, then you will, over time, build influence because people know that they'll be able to rely on you. I also think that influence comes with, as Bob said, really with responsibility. So, I mean, it's important to really understand what your goals are. Why do you want to have influence? What's the purpose of it? And if it is really only for personal self-advancement or self-promotion, then I would suggest that your influence will actually be limited and short-lived. And the people I admire the most who have the greatest influence are people who have that sense of responsibility to their community and to the world around them. And the people that I have the privilege of sharing this platform with are all great examples of that. I mean, Bob's made an outstanding success in business, and yet he supports the arts. He's done so much to support our community, but also internationally. Lisa is amazing, absolutely amazing when I think about what you've built in the last 6 years. But again, you're someone who really, I think, has done a wonderful job of integrating your values in your work. And then Shane, I think of as a really exemplary, a real exemplar of how to work effectively at the political level, at the government level, and he's had an enormous positive influence on the kind of support that we see our province actually delivering for social housing. So really great examples here on the platform.
Yeah, and I love that right from the outset you've made a distinction between types of influence, which I think is actually really critical, and we're going to get into that. Lisa, though, the meaning of influence for you?
I mean, we're touching on everything that's so fundamental, but I think at the very foundation, if you can't connect with people, you can't influence people, because the only point of having influence is persuading people to get on your side or buy into what it is that you're trying to get them to do. So being able to really listen to people and being able to offer as much value as you can, almost, well, selflessly for others, I think is the foundation of building some influence. I think especially nowadays with social media, we get very caught up in what we think of the optics of being influential, telling visual stories, making our lives seem very, very glamorous and exciting, and conflating that with influence when I think generally the most influential people I know are the people that you don't think of. They're the ones that are lifting everyone else around them up. Personally, I think the higher I can lift the people around me, the better I'll be at becoming an influential person. And I've been really lucky to be a Canadian delegate for the G20 Youth Entrepreneurship Summit several times, and one of the things that I see when I go to these places and I'm meeting very important business leaders or political leaders is they never really push themselves forward. They're really trying to find ways of using their spotlight to really get the people around them up to the next level. And I think in a corporate setting as well, for me with my team, very much like what Janet was saying, I can't tell them what to do. Or if I do, they might do it, but they're not really going to buy into my mission or build my company beyond what I can see for myself. So it's about being able to communicate the message and the emotion behind what it is that I want them to do and getting them to absorb it and take it in for themselves.
What about you?
So I was plagued all week. I was fretting about being on the panel with these three folks the entire week. I do a lot of speaking engagements and things like that, but nothing on something as esoteric as leadership. But so it got me to be thinking about, well, what is leadership? How do you get it? When do you know you have it? And how do you use it? And I think those are all great questions. And I think it's also contextual too. I was, thinking about, well, who has influence? I was thinking, well, Kim Kardashian has a lot of influence. People wear, the clothes she has and things like that, and has all of those followers. Well, Justin Bieber has influence. And so you go and you start thinking about those. I don't have a Twitter account or a Facebook account. And I said, boy, I'm like in the dark ages now. And so, but then you think about, then you get back to, well, what is the context in which you work? And mine is a lot of a political one in a big government organization. This is my 30th year in government and the 30th year in housing. And as I was listening to Bob, Janet, and Lisa, what really struck me about their stories was, and I hadn't thought about it, was passion. So passion for what you do, I think, is probably what grounds you in looking at how you move forward. And I don't think without that passion, you can make those steps. I have a passion for housing, and I've seen the difference that housing has made in the lives of people for the decades that I've been working in various housing organizations. So I think that passion piece is at the basis of it. And then when we get into the different kind of contexts of influence, how do you influence in a political environment? How do you influence in a social media environment? I think there are a number of common threads that we'll get to, and how you interact and wield that influence in a thoughtful way. I think there are a lot of commonalities between the different areas and contexts of influence. But I would just occurred to me as I was listening to the other three is starting out with passion for what you're doing is probably the key ingredient.
So let me follow up on that, and I'll ask this to wants to jump in. Is real influence then visible or invisible? Because I mean, Bob, you raised this idea of, influence, perhaps one definition being, will they take my phone call? Lisa, you talk about social media, and I think a lot of people would say, hey, influence is how many retweets you get, right? Janet, and you talk about being in a position of authority, right? That is one type of influence, a very overt type of influence. I think of all these different types, and so for you, real influence, is it behind the scenes or is it out there?
All of us use our real influence behind our visible core competencies. So you're out in the spotlight for what you do with your core competency, and then that allows you to work behind the scenes and sew those fabrics together that society needs, and anyone who will take your call so that you can marry them to other people and get things done. That we're only in the real estate business, so I can build an art collection. That's personally using my influence, but while everybody keeps their eye on the ball of what you're doing with your core competency, you can get things done on the planet. I mean, I don't know who said it earlier, but if you're using your influence to make money, it's very short-lived, because they won't take your call because you're only doing it for self-gain.
Which kind of influence would you say is harder to build? That core competency or the behind the scenes?
The invisible, and I think Janet said it's getting people to trust that you're going to follow through. My daughter told me something recently. She produces movies in Los Angeles, and she says if you show up and you'll return a call, you can control Hollywood. That nobody does it. And just we forget those real basics of that earns trust is you'll show up within 5 minutes on time and you'll return a call. People aren't doing it anymore.
I totally agree with that. That is so true. And really what it's about is having basic respect for the people that you're engaging with, regardless of where they are in the hierarchy, you know. And so treating as essentially everybody with respect. But I think, you know, to your question, influence can be both visible and invisible, either or both, you know. I think some people have an influence which really is based on their public profile, and they can choose to use that public profile for, you know, for positive. Others are influential because they may have the ear of a few key decision makers, you know. There's a difference, though, between access and influence, and I think sometimes people confuse that. They think because they can get an audience with someone that they can influence that person, and that's not always the case, you know. So really, I think to really have influence and use it effectively, it requires that you understand and make a conscious effort to understand what somebody else's goals are, what they're trying to accomplish, and when you show goodwill and a willingness to actually help them achieve those goals, then you will find, I think, that it comes back.
And it's not earned overnight either. You don't become an influencer overnight. So when you look back on, and I'm sure Bob can probably tell you the time where he believed that he had some influence. But picking up on Janet's point, it's consistent actions. It is how you show up, how you treat other people, deal with integrity and honesty. And I was also looking up, I don't usually do this, but looked up influence online, and it talks about influencing the actions or behavior of others. What are some of the synonyms for that? Well, some of the synonyms are reputation and leadership, and I think those are synonymous too. So how do you become a strong leader? And it was the things that Janice talked about, how you deal with people, how you show up, you do what you say you're going to do, and that helps to build up your reputation, and you know, your reputation equals your brand. Then people begin to trust your opinions, and they actually then begin to seek them out. I knew when it happened for me. I was working in Toronto, and the general manager asked me to go and play golf with him, and I was 3 levels below the general manager, and you know, every couple of weeks he would drop by my office on his way into work, and we would chat about just about housing issues. And so at that point, I didn't think about it at the time, as I was plagued for the past week trying to come up with some stories. I mean, that event came back to me.
So that's actually a really interesting point when it comes to the question of how you build influence, right, and how you grow it. If I understand you correctly, what you're saying is that if you just sort of you work, right? You put your head down, you do the job, you do it in a way that shows your integrity, shows your responsibility, shows your commitment to the team, then influence will come. I suppose another school of thought might be that you can set out to build influence in a very deliberate way, not just have it arrive as a byproduct of good, solid work. Would either of you say that's the case?
You're very much planting the seeds. Like what Shane is saying is you can do it, you know, naturally, organically, and you can also do it like Bob did with a real strong vision. But the fundamentals, the practice of it is the same, which is listening for what you can offer, listening for the value that you can have, and then having a really long game. You know, building real relationships with people, not expecting a payback within a 2-week time frame, I think is a big part of it. And I also think to really be truly influential, you need to develop a likability. And it's not always great to share that because we don't always want to say, well, I want to be liked or I want to be likable. But at the end of the day, you need people to help you. It's like what Janet was saying. Sure, people might show up to something, but if they're not willing to roll their sleeves up and be a part of your mission or your dream, you don't really have any influence. And I can only speak for myself, but I'm much more likely to go out of my comfort zone for someone that I actually like versus somebody that I think just wants to connect with somebody that I know or wants to learn how to start a business so that they can take that knowledge and never speak to me again.
Now, how far do you push that? So this idea of likability, right?
Yeah.
Do you continue that train of thought and you say, okay, well then that means how I leverage my likability by networking? right?
Well,
Is that
it's
what you're
part
saying?
of
That
it.
you have
I think it's also learning how do I be my best version of myself. And we're getting a little spiritual, but I do think it's about learning how to create a relationship with your ego where it's not always driving you. Because, we talk about influence, I think it's very connected to the idea of ambition. Why do we want to influence people? Well, we probably have goals and dreams that we want to achieve. We want to be leaders. We want to be powerful people, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that's a lot of ego. And generally, if we're leading from that place, we push people away. It's a real turnoff. Like, I've met people like that, and I'm sure I've been that person a few times where I'm just leading with, what can you give me? Because this networking event is only half an hour long, and I need 3 business cards to go home with, or it's been a waste of time. Yeah. So I think whenever I'm in that space, or I'm coming from that space, I'm not influential at all. I'm a taker. No one wants to help me. But if I walk into the room and focus on just being a good person, even though it sounds very simple, I think it's like a practice. I have to focus on, all right, well, what can I give? So are there people here that I can meet that I can connect with somebody else? Is there somebody here that I can connect to, YWCA or FWE? And for me, that's the idea of planting a seed. That's the long strategy for me to become influential, because it's paid back in a myriad ways that I haven't even realized. I've been very lucky that people that I might have met randomly that I helped out years ago and then forgot about have come back and offered me opportunity or sales or all sorts of great things that I didn't even realize were available to me, only because I just focus on, all right, I want to be the best version of Lisa that I can and not be selfish and greedy, but I still want to accomplish my goals, and I think you can do both. They don't have to be mutually exclusive.
I always said if I was ever going to write a book, it would be just because I'm nice, don't think I'm stupid.
Yeah.
The nice is so undervalued, and people are looking for safe places. I'll tell you a really quick story. I wrote it down. I don't know, it might not even apply. But the other day, I was in the Four Seasons. It was just before Justin Trudeau was elected. And sitting alone at 12:15 was Jean Chrétien. And I was with Tony Allard, a very, very, very influential, well-connected business leader. We walked past Jean Chrétien, and we were bouncing up and down like 10-year-olds. And I said, let's do it. And we went over to the table, and I said, Mr. Chrétien, so he's got influence. I said, Mr. Chrétien, I said, I talk about you all the time, that you changed my life and my children's life as you didn't follow Bush into Iraq, and you changed Canada. And he said, what's your name? I told him my name, and then he knew Tony Allard's father as Dr. Allard, a big communications guy. And then we spoke, and on the way out, I said to Ned, the chef, I said, would you put Mr. Chrétien and his 2 guests as they arrive on my bill? Mr. Chrétien phoned Sylvia, my assistant, about 6 o'clock that night, and said, ask Bob to meet me tomorrow morning at 6:45 for breakfast. I'll cancel anything. Met him at 6:45. And so I obviously had influence. It wasn't because I picked up his tab. And he had influence. And he sat down, and even at his stature, at 82 years old, he researched. And he said, I have 3 questions. First one, a young girl in interior design, should she move to Vancouver? And I said, you know what, Mr. Chrétien, all you old guys always have a young girl somewhere that you want done a favor. And I said, seriously? And he said, Mr. Rennie, I'm 82 years old. It's my granddaughter. You just go. But what I get is, with influence, you have to be prepared to be real. They want real conversations. They don't want you bowing to them all the time. And then he said, I want to talk about, is there a bubble in this market? And I'd like to talk to you about art and my son, who's an artist. So even at his level, with all his influence, he still did the research. He came in humbly, I came in humbly, and I phoned him the day Justin won, and I said, Mr. Chang, I said, somebody that we supported, can you guys keep your eye on him? And he said something so brilliant. He said, I'm the mother-in-law. Justin can see my house from his house, and I can see Justin's house from my house. He'll call me if he needs me. Yeah. So just, to me, all the influence that happened there, everybody was real. When I said about the daughter, about a young girl, that was his time to walk out. Yeah. But everybody is looking to be real and for a real conversation. I don't know where this fits, but it's just something you said.
It's interesting because, I had the privilege of having dinner with Mr. Chang just about a week before. So it wasn't just Jean and me. It was an intimate group.
With him, but go ahead.
but what you're saying about him was so interesting because I could see it was an intimate dinner, and I was really privileged to be invited to it. But what I absolutely took away from it was his discipline. So even though he was among friends, he was so thoughtful and so prepared, in terms of what he said to us, how he conducted himself, just his discipline in terms of he didn't have anything to drink, So that level of preparation and that kind of thoughtfulness about his audience, and it wasn't like a formal audience, I think is a mark of somebody who really understands how to use that art of influence well and takes it seriously. And I think that's really fundamental.
Doing your homework,
Yeah,
I guess,
absolutely.
is the bottom line.
A simple way.
At 82, he's doing his homework.
Absolutely,
You don't think,
yeah.
there's a certain point you
You
can
can
quit.
relax,
You
but-
always have to be researched.
Let me ask you folks about social media. Because I know that from having met you just a few minutes before this, that 3 of the 4 of you do not have a Twitter account, for example. And I guess, anyone could very easily ask the question, how do you be influential in this age if you're not on social media? What do you say to that?
Well, that's a kind of influence, and I think it's not the only kind of influence. So, I admit it, I fully admit it, I'm a dinosaur, but we actually did have a discussion in my organization about whether that is something that I should do. And I said to my colleagues, look, if it's important for me to do it for the YWCA, I will do it. But let's actually think about what it means and what is the best way for us as an organization to take advantage, of the social media platforms that are available. And through that process, we agreed that, in fact, an organizational Twitter account and all the other platforms is more effective than having me try to manage a large number of contacts, having me try to provide the ongoing content that would be needed for it to be effective. So I don't want to do it unless I can do it effectively. And I think I know it would be challenging for me. So I don't think it's effective use of my time, and I don't think it's helpful to the organization. So that's the decision we made. However, I'm open to changing my mind,
Well, and that it wasn't a fit for you, was that, how much of that was because of the industry that you're in? Because I do think of some industries, if I was, a pop star, probably being on social media is a pretty important thing.
Absolutely. And so again, it's a different kind of influence. So I think the YWCA, we deal with such a huge range of current social issues. And we have, I think, a very robust social media presence. But I'm not the only person that should be carrying the can for that. So we have staff who blog on social and affordable housing, on violence against women, on hypersexuality, all kinds of things. It doesn't all have to come through me. And I think it's important to remember that. So I think we do have the mechanisms that it's about the work, it's not about my personal profile. I guess that's what I would say.
And Lisa, what about you? Because you are...
I'm a reluctant social media user. I'm not a huge fan of it just because I find it's such a time suck. Like, it's a vortex of time wasted to me. But again, I think it ties in very much to what Janet is saying. There's different types of influence that you would use it for. And I think you really need to have a goal. And I think it's very similar to what you're saying. If I was a fashion blogger, for example, I would need to have a social media presence. But social media can be extremely dangerous. So for me, I'm not ready to invest in building the strategy and being really careful and producing content. That's a full-time job for a lot of people. And if you post one thing incorrectly, if you flub on social media, the world is so fast now that it carries over. Like, it lasts forever. And so I find that it's a big responsibility. Currently, I don't have private social media accounts, so you'll be able to see some of my posts. I'll probably have to delete it later.
We'll try to dig those up for the after party.
About that. But it's one of those things where you have to be so careful with it. And I've actually not hired people because of their social media presence, and they haven't remembered, like I haven't remembered, to clean that up before going into an interview or anything like that. So I think a lot of times it's so prevalent in our life, it's something that we become so casual about, we're on it all the time that we forget there's a certain responsibility or strategy involved in using it. I mean, my dream would be to hire somebody who would run all my social media for me so that I don't have to do it, because again, I feel like what Janet's saying, my time can be better spent in other ways. But again, I don't want to be a pop star, so it's different.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned earlier, I think it's how you influence needs to be put into a context. A lot of the folks that I deal with are politicians. I report to a minister who also happens to be the deputy premier. So, getting your opinion out in social media is not the method of influence for me. It's much more direct and much more subtle and much more personal and one-on-one. And picking up on Lisa's point, when we do hires now, BC Housing has 700 employees. We always do social media searches on the folks that we hire. And we were talking on the phone in the lead up to this, and we were talking about, well, how could social media help you to influence or wipe out your influence in a heartbeat? And virtually could happen overnight. So I don't want to take that risk.
The idea of losing influence is an interesting one, right? And there have been so many extreme cases on social media, right? Where you tweet the wrong thing, you say the wrong thing on any channel, and your career is down the tubes. But what if we look at losing influence in a more subtle way? Sort of the ebb and flow of your influence over time. Because what I wonder is it kind of like exercise where you have to work it, you have to work to maintain influence, or once you've achieved influence, being an influential person, you just kind of ride that wave for a while? How do you see that? Do you focus on it on a daily basis in that way?
Extremely organic. That I could never imagine getting out of bed and saying, I hope I have influence. You just do what you do. The word passion just keeps coming back. Right.
But the behaviors, though, the behaviors of how you interact are always front and center in your mind. How you treat others, how you want to be treated. Those things are always there. And they are the ingredients of influence.
It's your personality. That it becomes part of your DNA. I use a lot of, as Lisa was talking, a lot of it is dating. I'm in a new relationship. I would never Google the person that I'm seeing. I would like to receive new and fresh information, and I think meeting anybody in business, I don't Google people before I meet them. And I would like to hear firsthand what they have to tell me. And I think we get so much information, we arrive with all these preconceived ideas about everybody. And if you Google me, I have more parking tickets than anybody in the city. And people think I don't pay them, but we pay them all. But you arrive with a preconceived idea. And then you have to break down all those barriers. The three of us, Lisa's out, are not on Facebook or on Twitter. Companies are, but I don't think it's necessary to live in total public therapy. Earn your reputation in front of people. But I think you have to meet as many people face to face as you can along the way as you build a career.
Well, speaking of face to face, I've got some questions here that people have been writing in to the site. And so, again, I'll open this up to whoever wants to answer this, because this is a really good practical question. How can I influence a potential employer to hire me? I was taking influence on a very literal level, right? You want to influence that person to give you a job. How do you do it?
I think I've just been interviewing people, I've been hiring right now, and there are certain things that stand out in my mind as an employer. Number one, I love it when people dress up and come early. I love it when they come prepared. I mean, these are very basic, practical things, but you'd be amazed by how many people don't do it. I also love it when people follow up. And I actually have a policy, particularly when I'm hiring salespeople. I won't bring anyone in for an interview if they don't follow up with me at least twice. And when I say that, I mean they'll email in their resume and I won't respond, and then they have to email me again to check in. And
you want them to pester you until they get
and I won't respond. And then when they check in the third time, that's when I call them right away and bring them in for an interview, because I know if they're not going to sell themselves, they're not going to sell me. Like, if they're not going to go to that extra level for their own life, for their own opportunities, why would they ever have the skill set to do that for my company? They won't. So I need people that are going to be able to take that risk of being annoying, because it's not annoying, I love it, but take that risk for themselves.
Does every employer feel the same way, though?
Maybe not. Maybe it's just me. But I want somebody that's a go-getter on my team. And I think maybe it's a Canadian thing that we do, but we're very humble here. We rarely talk about our accomplishments with a sense of pride. I mean, I think Shane and I were just talking this on the way in. We were saying, oh, I don't know if I should be on a panel about influence. I don't know if I'm influential. But at the same time, you know, you think about all the things that we've done, I think we've done pretty well. And why not talk about and try to share what we've learned with our accomplishments? So I think from an employee point of view, I want to know you. I want to know what you've done outside of your studies. And I don't even look at resumes. Like, I want to know about who you are and are you going to fit in my team. And I want to know that you are a thoughtful person, as Janet was saying. That's a huge one. Are you going to follow up? And do you have the basic etiquette to represent my company and to fit into my team?
Two of the other top questions on this list have to do with life lessons, important lessons that you've learned about life or about the mastery of influence. Who wants to take that one on? An important lesson that you've learned that you can distill into a couple of minutes for all these folks here to digest.
So I, years ago, had this boss, and he was this big, huge bear of a Scottish man. And he was all bark and no bite, but he was like a lot of bark, you know. But he used to have these kind of corny sayings, but there was always a kernel of wisdom to them. And so one of them was, I can't do a Scottish accent, but it was like, be nice to people on your way up, because you never know who you may meet on your way down. You know, and I always thought that was great advice, because it really, at its heart, it's about building those positive relationships, and it's about making the effort to make that relationship positive, and that's especially important when there's conflict, right? So when you're in a position to do somebody else a favor to help them achieve their goals, then I really recommend you make an effort to do that. You don't do it for expectation of gain, but inevitably it comes back to you in unexpected ways. So that's something I would share.
I absolutely agree. I remember when I was at the U of T doing my graduate thesis, and we had to get experts from the outside. And I remember making like 5 calls, and these were 2 professionals in government organizations or in academia, and first 4 said no. The 5th one said yes, and you know, helped through the presentation of my master's thesis, and took the time out. I went to their office to meet with them, helped, you know, gave me some good advice. So anytime a student asks to meet, if they have a housing issue they want to discuss, I don't brush them off. I will have them into my office, and we'll sit down and have a half hour or an hour conversation about the issues that they're dealing with. So always that kind of give back. And the other, you know, I've been in the bureaucracy for now 30 years, and you know, I've developed some rules of the bureaucracy, and I think some of the most important ones are, as leaders, you listen 80% of the time, and I'm always conscious of that. You listen 80% of the time, speak 20% of the time, even if you're the most senior person in the room. It's really an important thing to do. Never speak first. Always get the diverse opinions, because it will result in better decisions for you. And when you have success amongst your team, it's success for you, and it's about building those kind of teams. So I always keep those simple rules at the top of my mind whenever I have any of those particular types of engagements.
We have any questions in the crowd? You can just sort of raise your hand. We've got staff with microphones who can make their way around and make sure that we get your question in. Any takers right away? I've got a few more questions on the list, so it's okay if you don't. Yeah.
Stay humble. Ian Gillespie, mega developer in the city. Ian asked me to do the Palisades in the 1200 block, West Georgia, and I said to him, we were riding pretty high in 95, and I said, you know what, Ian, you know what I do. I'm not doing a 65 proposal. You know what we charge. You decide. And he hung up the phone and swore he would never speak to me again. Thank God the project didn't go very well, and he phoned me and he said, I'll give you a chance at the residence on Georgia. And I said, don't talk to me. I said, let me send you a letter. I hung up the phone and I sent a 2-page handwritten letter that somebody had told me, why would you deal with Ian? He's the white guy. He's not Abbey Wood's Robert Kwok's company from Singapore. A lawyer told me that, and I followed that. And I wrote it, and I said, I apologize, I made a mistake, and I sent over a thermos and a cup of coffee, and I said, while you read this letter, have a cup of coffee. And when I went on and worked for Ian for 18 years because of that letter, and it taught me such an enormous lesson. After 18 years, we decided we were non-practicing homosexuals, so we should probably separate. But it was an amazing, amazing relationship, and I have so much time for Ian. But it really taught me sort of mid-career, as you start to think that it's all because of you, stay humble, because we're always constantly learning. John Chang's an example, still researching.
Well, what you're saying there too is admit your mistakes. You know, I mean, that makes such a huge difference. You know, when I occasionally have to perhaps give someone some critical feedback, what I always try to do is to use myself as an example and to find something that I've done in my past, you know, and so to say to them, and it makes it possible for people to own their mistake without feeling defensive about it. I also had a boss years ago who gave me some very good advice, which was, treat your problem employee as your star performer. You know, if you've got somebody that you're having an issue with, what you're going to do is you're going to give them a chance to be that star performer. And so approach them and deal with them that way. Expect the best of people, and generally they will not disappoint you. Now, it doesn't always work, you know, but I think people will live up to those expectations very often.
Do we have questions in the crowd? Let me then pick up just on this idea of, because this is a popular question on the list in terms of characteristics and traits that influential people have. Obviously, we've picked up on a lot of them so far. Humility, you know, right? Being humble is one of them. Being nice, I think that's come out a number of times. Lisa, you mentioned being punctual, being well dressed, being persistent.
Yeah, be thoughtful.
Thoughtful?
It's very much what Bob was just talking about. You know, the little touches of thinking of somebody else or anticipating needs or adding that value is a lost art that very few people practice now. You know, when was the last time you ever got a thank you card in the mail or a physical piece of mail? You know, the excitement you get when you get one of those, it's better than anything. So practicing that and becoming very, very good at it, I think is a commonality I've seen among some of the most influential people I know. They take the time to do the little niceties that most of us assume are unimportant or don't matter.
Any of you OCD? I'm extremely, extremely OCD. Everything's routine. No?
I'm the opposite.
Okay.
Well, that's good. Then anyone on the spectrum.
I'm not either. I just said that to make one of you feel comfortable.
I think one of the behaviors or traits is defaulting to yes. You know, don't start off with no. You know, when you're presented with an idea, make your default always yes. All the problems will crop up later in the whys. You can't do it, but be positive, and that's what I try to do. Default to yes.
Just to pick up on that, always say yes, right? Take the opportunity, seize the day. You know, try not to shut things down before they've really sort of arrived on your doorstep. You ever worry about burning out at all? If you take that approach? Yes. Yeah.
No, because even when you default to yes, things evolve and change, and you know, one of the other traits is being flexible and innovative and creative, and you'll be able to fix things. And if you default to no, you've just shut the door.
Canadians were extremely passive aggressive. And especially this city without head offices. In most cities in the world, you have head offices that give back and they want to be recognized. And so we have that parental guidance. So here we don't have head offices, and we just don't understand that, you know, as Nelson Mandela says, it's okay to shine so you can show other people that they can shine. And I think we're also passive aggressive to really show our core competencies. And I think that fine line between arrogance and confidence, and you have to wrestle with it yourself, but you have to find a way through that, because this is a really tough city. It's tougher than any city that we deal with in the world because of that passive aggressiveness. You will sit with people and you don't know whether they're voting NDP or Liberal. They're agreeing with both sides. Everybody's riding two horses rather than really show where they're at. And, you know, we survive on our similarities, but you'll only be known for your differences in the end, so you may as well get them out on the table.
At the, we do have a question over there.
Yes, I have a question for people even starting out in their career, or perhaps if you've ever been in a situation where you need to influence up, in the sense that, you know, you are all wonderful leaders and you come to your place of work and approach life from, you know, high values and morals and ethics. But occasionally, you know, we work with people that maybe don't behave in that way. And I don't mean that they're evil and, you know, they're cheating the system, but they, you know, they're late, or they tell you what to do, and, you know, you may like them and believe in their company or their cause, but the way they're doing it can sometimes rub the wrong way. So how do you know, influence somebody to be a better influencer or a better leader?
Like, I found this, people aren't really very direct or upfront anymore, it seems like, but I have had experiences where I really haven't liked the way that somebody was trying to coach me or lead me or work on a project together, and I think it's so much easier to just sit down with someone very quickly instead of letting resentment or challenges grow, because they will, but to just sit down with them and say, look, I love this project, or I love you, but this doesn't work for me because of X, Y, Z. A lot of times I think most people don't even realize that they're being bad leaders, or that they're being abrasive, or not being good influencers. So, you know, being able to have that kind of open conversation with somebody in it's a delicate dance, because you don't want to shut somebody down or put them in their place. You just want to lead from you and say, this doesn't work for me because of this. If we alter that, then we can work together. I mean, I think it is very complicated, because you do want to lead from an open place where you're not dictating to everyone else how to be. You can only come from you by being humble and open. But get it out of the way. And I think it's very much like what Bob was saying before. Be genuine. So few people are. So few people lead from an open place of like, okay, this is who I am and this is what works. And that is very rare, and I think that that's a big turn-on for people.
The hardest to do is to control the bad guy in a boardroom setting, because you want to deal with it, but if you deal with it too harshly, you just change the atmosphere of the entire room. So if you can do it a little bit through humor, it might be, but you know, our office is full of sayings, but whoever gets to the truth first wins. Because once you've told the truth, you can't spin it. It's just, we're going to have to deal with it. This is what it is. And if you can just do it more with a smile on your face. But the boardroom setting is such a psychology.
You know, I completely agree that if there are issues, you can't let them fester. You have to deal with them. But sometimes it can be helpful if you're self-reflective and people see you being self-reflective. Sometimes also you can ask questions or make suggestions to somebody, which, you know, is quite different than telling them they're doing something wrong. So, you know, there's a friend of mine who's a banking vice president, and his staff absolutely love him. When he wants to give them some feedback, he always says, now, you might want to consider, you know? So he gives them that opening, but he makes it okay for them to acknowledge that perhaps they haven't done things perfectly.
Yeah, my mom told me that once. So when you want to convince somebody of something, always give them an escape route. Yeah. So you always give them an out so that they can save face. Because you never want to put people down, because you'll just turn them off, or they'll turn against you. You really want to approach it in a way that you leave an opportunity for them to back out graciously.
Can I want to ask each of you just a yes/no question. Yeah. All of this that we're talking about, does this come easily to you? Does it come naturally to you? Shane, yes or no? I've asked too much.
You know, so yes.
Yes? Lisa?
I feel like parts are yes and parts are no.
Yeah. Janet?
I think I've matured largely into a yes. I don't think I was always like that, but...
Oh, it's only one word.
Yeah, sorry. Yes!
Bob?
Yes, I'm lazy about it, yes.
And here's the reason I ask this, because it strikes me that I mean, you guys have great advice, right? Great sort of life lessons about how to do all this stuff. I can very easily imagine myself in a position, or any of you in a position where I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, my gosh, how do I ever gather the courage, the wherewithal to do any of this, right?
We're all nervous of you. Seriously, the four of us are going, you know, you're the journalist. You're our Walter Cronkite. We're old.
but here's
we're intimidated by you, and now you've made it easy. So you've got the influence.
Well, okay, but here's the thing. I think there are people on this planet who are extroverts, and for whom this all comes very easily. There are people who are introverts, for whom this is very draining. This idea of trying to influence other people, trying to muster whatever power of persuasion, whatever it may be. If you're on that side of the coin. Okay, if anyone's listening to this and they say, this all sounds really difficult to ever get into a position where the four of you are, what then?
Well, I'm an introvert, and I love it when people talk about their introversion because, people will often think, oh, well, that can't possibly be the case, but in fact it is. So I think for me, it really is about, I kind of hate the word, but it is about being authentic. It's about being who you are. You talked about being nice, and I think when I was younger, people would often use that niceness as a bit of a, damning with faint praise. Oh, Janet, she's just a lovely person, right? But maybe she's not that competent. And it took me a long time to really become comfortable with actually, and proud of being a decent person or aspiring to be a decent person, treating people well and having that part of my whole approach. And I think that's, honestly, it's a large part of where my influence comes from.
It's a long game, though.
It's a long game, yeah.
So, I mean, long game is one thing. Was there a moment, though, where you sort of realized, you know what, I have to change this about myself, then I can accomplish great things? There was no moment, no switch, nothing?
No, and I don't think life is like that. I think there's very few occasions where you have that kind of an apotheosis. I think it's a lifelong journey, and you never actually get there. You're always learning. You're always, I think, hopefully, trying to learn more, to be self-reflective, to improve, who you are and how you deal with others.
It was definitely work because I had to learn to get really comfortable with being uncomfortable and being very at peace with self-doubt, because for me that's been a big part of my journey. And being comfortable putting myself out in situations where I really think that I'm going to fail often. And just very much like what Shane was saying yes to things that I didn't think that I was ready for or that I was able to do. Saying yes and not really knowing how I was going to do it was a big part of my life up to now as an entrepreneur. Like, I don't have a background in business at all. So a lot of it was like very much flying by the seat of my pants and fake it till you make it philosophy. And I was lucky when I was just starting out that I met Bob, and he talked to me about, developing this personal brand, which is actually something for an introvert that can be a really powerful tool, because it can be a shield in a way if you build a brand that you can almost essentially hide behind when you're not feeling as confident as you'd like to be. It is almost like a persona or like a Sasha Fierce that you can use, like Beyonce has, that you can use as a tool. And I remember what it's like to be sitting in that chair and to be like, well, it's easy for them to say they're naturals. What about people like me? Like, I have to do the work.
I just want to, sorry to cut you off, I just want to give each of you one last opportunity to impart one final piece of wisdom. And because we're so tight on time, 20 seconds each. Who wants to start? Final bit of wisdom for becoming influential.
I'll get it over with. Okay, so I have a quote, which is Albert Einstein, and he said, that setting an example is not the main way of influencing others, it's the only way. So my advice would be, honestly, be yourself, and find your voice, find your passion, and I think that really is the path forward.
Be very kind to yourself and understand that it's going to be a journey and that it's going to take time, and don't feel like you have to rush it. Just be confident in the timing of your life.
Shane?
They took both of mine. I had one, then the other one. I would reiterate the passion piece. To me, the career in housing has been that, and where it comes from is making a difference in people's lives. And I think if you start from those kind of basic guttural things, will be successful.
Bob, final
Yeah, and I think don't be afraid to be vulnerable. Everybody's insecure, and they love to see that you're vulnerable, and show your insecurities, because that's who you really are. And I think then people start to feel comfortable with you. But I will swear, avoid assholes. Just go to safe places. There's no use trying to win over or do somebody business with a bad guy. Just move on and don't waste your time. But you have to trust your instinct, because often we think we can tame the tiger. You can't. That's their DNA, and just move on.
The folks doing the editing for the video now have to bleep that last answer out. Hey, thank you to our panel. Give them a round of applause. Thank you for listening. I hope this has all been informative. Hope it's all been useful to you. Just a reminder again, the reception is coming up right now, so you'll all have a chance to meet one-on-one with these kind folks. And I'll turn things back over to Jen.
Thank you. And I have to say, I feel so privileged to have been here and listened in on this great conversation. So Bob, Janet, Lisa, Shane, Andrew, thank you again on behalf of all of us. What a great conversation, such great lessons. So let's give them one more round of applause.